Well, hello, everyone. Happy Wednesday. I hope you're all doing well. We have got an amazing guest today on the channel, and I just realized that I wanted to show you guys something that I didn't set up beforehand. So that's why I look a little bit distracted. But we're gonna have a great chat today. Kind of continuing on a debrief of what in the heck happened with that midterm. Now, you guys know what I think happened in the midterm, probably because I did about 17 streams on it, and I have been bragging probably a little bit more than I should be bragging on Twitter that I was right and predicted it 6 months ago, and I was told I was wrong over and over again. So I've been taking a little bit of a victory lap on my end, but I do actually want to have a serious conversation about this because I don't think it is just as simple as saying it was just one thing that led to the midterm outcome. I think it was probably a lot of things that led to the midterm outcome. And so my guest today, Joseph Ford Cotto, is going to join us. He has been on the channel before. He is a regular. He is a favorite. And I'm going to introduce him in a second. But before we get into that, I just wanted to let you know, guys, that I kind of off the cuff decided to do another stream tonight. Now, it's like a 2-stream kind of day. And you guys know that sometimes when I'm watching content that I feel like I need to watch or understand for some reason, I don't watch a lot of YouTube content just because I don't really see the need to. But every once in a while, people say, Carlin, you need to watch this, or you need to watch that, or you need to watch this other thing. And I kind of think, well, if I'm going to be sitting down and knitting while I'm watching this content anyway, then I might as well watch that content with friends. And so tonight I will be returning at 10 p.m. for a late night stream. And we're going to launch something that was actually your idea because I did one of these streams. I think I was watching like Ramsey Paul or something, where you guys were like watching me react to like this Ramsey Paul content, and you were like, Carlin, you should call this series Knitwits because you're knitting and you're watching, well, maybe not the best content in the world. And so I decided to just go with that. And we are starting our Knitwits series tonight. And we're starting with Chrissy Mayer because I don't understand why Chrissy Mayer is popular at all. Not at all. Now, I started my journey as someone who, I started my journey when I left the Democratic Party as being someone who was listening to content that I thought I would disagree with. So I'm perfectly capable of sitting down and trying to listen to someone else's content that I don't like or that I might disagree with to try to learn what I can from it, because I do think we can learn from these things. But I'm also going to be expressing some more devilish opinions as well. That's what happens on late night streams. And so you can join me at 10 p.m. tonight for the inaugural episode of Knitwits. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And I will show off my knitting. I will actually be knitting tonight. I'll show you what I'm working on and we can talk about it and just hang out and watch some content and see what we can learn and, maybe be a little bit bitchy or snarky in the process. It happens every once in a while. I also want to let everyone know that we do have movie night coming up this week in the supporter Discord. We are watching They Live on Sunday at 8 p.m. If you've never seen They Live, you have to see They Live, okay? They Live is like required viewing so far as I'm concerned. First of all, it's got something for everyone. It has the longest fight scene in the history of cinema. It's got aliens, it's got intrigue, it's got dystopian reality. And believe it or not, it is highly, highly, highly relevant to our time today. So you can join us on my supporter Discord this Sunday at 8 p.m. and watch it with us. How you get access to that is by heading over to activelyunwoke.com/support, and you can sign up on either my Patreon, anywhere from $5 a month all the way up to $250 a month, depending on how much you like me on any given day, I suppose, but the $5 level will do just fine. Or you can sign up as a member of my locals community, $5 a month, $50 a year, or more if you want to. And both of those things will get you access to my supporter Discord. And then you can come and join us for movie night this week. And any week we do movie night. We've been doing them very regularly lately. And you can even join us for book club coming up. Now, you guys know I don't like to be controversial at all. So I decided to have a Unabomber book club. I've never read the Unabomber Manifesto. I'm looking forward to reading the Unabomber Manifesto because I think that we should think about these things. And I've heard from a number of libertarians that, well, he made a lot more sense than people may want to have given him credit for. So the Unabomber part aside, we are going to be reading Industrial Society and Its Future and discussing it in my community on December 3rd at 3 p.m. So you've got plenty of time to get it, plenty of time to read up some nice light Thanksgiving reading as you're dealing with the family and all that good stuff coming up. I think it's going to be just great. All right, without further ado, guys, now that I've shamelessly shilled and plugged and did all the things, I'm happy to welcome back to the channel Joseph Ford Cotto, the first Baron Cotto. He is a former nationally syndicated newspaper columnist. He was also editor of a book review, and in addition to being an amazing author, he is the co-host of Cotto Gottfried, an online current affairs program. All of his information and links to his channel and his Twitter are in the description below. Joseph, welcome back to the channel.
Thank you very much for having me on, Carlin, and obviously your kind words about my presence are greatly appreciated. Soon enough, I will also be a doctor, interestingly. So one
Oh,
of our streams,
congratulations.
thank you. It'll be two doctors talking about who knows what. A very different field, though, than your doctorate's in. Mine would be business administration. So it should make for some cool discussions down the road about whatever current events come up that's relevant to what we've been educated in. I'm sure there'll be some stuff. But talking about obviously what's going on now, there are a lot of different things. Obviously, the GOP's unfortunate, I'll be kind, showing in the midterms. It's one can't just attribute it to a single thing. There's a very tempting prospect. People think, well, it's this or that or the other, but in reality, a lot of things went wrong for the GOP that the GOP didn't want to deal with. I think the first and foremost, the 800-pound gorilla in the room is abortion.
It's abortion.
Yeah.
Like, duh.
Exactly. But this is not surprising to me. As a matter of fact, when you and I were discussing politics earlier in the year, I believe we both referred to the importance of the abortion issue and how the Republicans were not handling it well. And to say the least, they didn't handle well. They thought basically that abortion didn't matter. They could go as far as they wanted to go with it, and it would have no electoral consequences. They believed that inflation, particularly in this election cycle, would overshadow abortion in terms of importance when it comes to most voters. And for a plurality of voters nationally, it is indeed the case that inflation was more important than abortion. However, abortion was right on inflation's heels. And in some important places like Pennsylvania, abortion actually eclipsed inflation as the number one issue on voters' minds. So that's abortion just isn't going anywhere, period. It's too personal of an issue. It has too many ramifications for the individual and society. And the GOP is on the wrong side of it insofar as national public opinion goes. This is not to say that some radical Democratic perspectives like, abortion in the 30th week of gestation or whatever are popular ideas. They're not. But neither is, the sort of ban one sees from Texas or Oklahoma. So, I mean, there are different ways of approaching the abortion issue. And it just so happens that the GOP is approaching this issue from all the bad angles.
Yeah, I mean, I think on abortion for me, it wasn't even just about necessarily the issue itself. And I remember when that decision was made, I said, like, everyone was telling me, and I'm sure you were hearing the same thing, no one cares about abortion. No one cares about abortion. And what I kept telling people is, okay, you've given the Democrats 6 months to hammer relentlessly on you to make people care about abortion. And I think what happened in at least this happened in New Hampshire, but the Democrats raised record amounts of money off of the issue. They were basically able to print as much money as they wanted to. And in New Hampshire, they were spending money on pushing ads into New Hampshire for 6 months, just talking about abortion and attacking people on abortion. And there was not a day that went by that I didn't see one of these abortion ads. And so it may not have been something that people cared enough about at the time, but the Democrats made sure it was top of mind for people just because they used all the money to do it. And I think it also absolutely activated the youth voter turnout. I saw someone tweeted, I forget who, maybe like Jack Posobiec or something, tweeted something like, if only people over 30 were allowed to vote, then the GOP would have had its red wave. Well, unfortunately, people under 30 are actually allowed to vote, and they turned out really high for the Democrats.
They did. And, I say this as someone who's in favor of bringing the voting age back up to 21. But the youth vote is a matter of severe concern for the GOP, and the GOP can't simply ignore that. The Republicans did better with millennials in this cycle, far better than I thought they would. They only lost millennials by 4 or 5 points, which, for me is, I'm a millennial, and it's quite shocking because millennials have always been quite on the left. My suspicion is that Republicans did well with older millennials while tanking with with younger millennials, because among Zoomers, they got totally wiped out. It was not, to say it wasn't close is being too kind. It was a total wipeout. And the Zoomer vote was larger, as a larger share of the electorate than a lot of folks, including me, thought it would be. So it's the situation with Zoomers. I mean, it pertains to a lot of things. Abortion definitely was a motivator for them. Also, the absurd promise of, through an executive order, Biden forgiving a great deal of student loan debt. That also got a lot of Zoomers out. Of course, there was some, poetic justice or pitch black comedy, however you want to approach it, to this, because right after the election, a federal judge ruled that it's impossible for Biden's executive order to go through. The program's null and void. Highly unlikely, obviously, the Supreme Court's going to overturn that. So basically, this whole student loan forgiveness thing that the Democrats ran on to motivate younger voters, which did work, it went up in flames. But I don't think they really cared, because I don't think Biden ever thought that this bizarre thing, which basically he just found justification for out of thin air, I don't think he ever expected it to hold up. I think it was always basically an election season bait and switch.
Yeah, it was actually funny. We were talking about this in my locals community in our private Zoom call on Monday, where I said, now watch, they're going to extend the student loan freeze again. Well, I'm never paying student loans again after this. And sure enough, literally an hour after I said that, breaking news, Biden administration considering extending student loan freeze again. And I'm like, they're just going to keep running on this and running on this. And I think we talked about this last time too,
Yep.
with abortion. They're never going to agree to a federal law codifying abortion. I think they would try to do it at the state level, but they're never going to do that, because it's like a federal law codifying abortion doesn't allow them to continue to run on abortion
Exactly.
and agitate on abortion, right?
Without question, the Democrats actually put forward a bill that can never pass when it comes to codifying Roe. They had done the most moderate proposal they could do, that I think probably would pass, at least as Congress is composed right now, is ensuring that up to 12 weeks is legal federally throughout the country, and then beyond that, the states can regulate. That would be that would be the best compromise of any. But they didn't do that because they never really wanted to see this ban. They never really wanted to see this, codification of Roe, which is a ban on the bans. What they want to do is keep this around as an election season football. And I think they will continually, promote ideas like protecting abortions up to 2 weeks after birth at the federal level that they know are going nowhere. But it's a great way of ginning up the base. It's also a great way of demoralizing the Republicans and making them feel that all hope is lost, because obviously, if these proposals keep coming up, the idea is going to be that, well, eventually, sooner or later, it's going to pass, that, this is a losing issue for us. So I think the Democrats are playing mind games here with their own
Oh,
base and
yeah.
with the other party. And I don't think they really care about what I care about, which is making sure that at least for the first trimester across the country, people are able to get abortions.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Now, I want to just tackle kind of like the elephant in the room, because I know exactly what I'm going to hear from a lot of people on the political right in response to this stream, which is it was obviously voter fraud. That's obviously why we lost the election. It was all fraud. It was all rigged. There was no point in voting ever again. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, in every election cycle, I'm sure there is some, particularly with male voters, voter fraud. But in terms of this election cycle, the voter fraud is not what caused the GOP to do so poorly. Abortion was, also changing demographics, which doesn't, people often think that's just a smokescreen for saying race or ethnicity. The political demographics pertain to so many different groups in society that I can't even begin to get into it here. It could be education, it could be geography, it could be sex. It could be marital status, religion, so on and so forth. It pertains to a lot of different stuff. And the Republicans are on the losing end of rapid demographic shifts. So that's a big thing that was running against them, particularly in key states. Also, the COVID era regulations about mail voting that a lot of states adopted are not going away, even though COVID's no longer a big deal. And that's not surprising, because what happens is that the Democrats don't need fraud. What they can do is simply send a ballot to every registered voter, if they control the state government, so they could be able to do this in the first place. Then the party, not the state government, would go around to all registered Democrats and ask them, did you send back your ballot? And they actually have very detailed basically stats, which indicate who votes typically, who votes atypically, and they would go after the atypical voters. They wouldn't obviously waste time with typical voters. They would go after the atypical voters, either doing a house call or a phone call or a text message, and they would do this in order to motivate these people to send back their mail ballot. And in some states, it's as simple: you could vote a straight ticket, so without even having to do the whole ticket. In some states, people just will fill in a bubble and that's it. So it's really interesting to see how the Democrats have been able to inflate turnout simply because of these postal ballots. They have definitely figured out how to get voters out that typically would be. Now, if we were back in 2014, which is the last time the GOP had a really strong midterm victory, the voting regulations were far different across the country. There was far less mail voting, overwhelmingly in-person voting, much more election day voting. And it's actually the Republicans who tended to do well with mail voting, but then that changed. But even back then, there were no automatic ballots sent to you for life or anything like that. And neither party really had a good apparatus of trying to motivate infrequent voters. Is just whoever wants to get the ballot gets the ballot, and the parties would instead focus on actual physical turnout, either in early voting, which wasn't even as widespread then, or of course election day voting. Now election day voting across the country makes up a diminishingly small amount of overall ballots cast, and most votes on election day obviously are Republican. But the Republicans do have the edge with in-person early voting, particularly in Florida, where I'm from. They do an outstanding job of it, and they don't have ballot harvesting. They don't have these ballots sent to you for life via mail. So that's why the Democrats here are not able to they're able to have good turnout. They're basically, because of the rules of the state, and also their immense financial woes, stuck in 2014, whereas Democrats, say in Georgia or in New Hampshire or in Arizona, are very much in 2022, barreling toward 2024. So it's unique, but the fact of the matter is that these ballots being sent out by mail are absolutely a gold mine of potential for the Democrats. They know how to get their voters to send their ballots back. The GOP still has to focus on actually turning voters out physically, and there's good and bad to that. I'll say before obviously the conversation goes back to you. The good of it is that you don't have to worry about ballots getting lost in the mail. You don't have to worry about people deciding, well, it's not worth it, blah blah blah. If people actually are, if they're bused to the polls, they're at the polls, and if they are voting at the polls, at the polling station in the traditional sense, the ballots cast, and that's that. But the Democrats do know how to juice up turnout with these with these postal ballots. So this is it's a unique situation. The Democrats obviously have the upper hand in states where there are these ridiculous vote by mail laws, whereas the Republicans in someplace like Florida that doesn't have these laws, they have the upper hand. So it really goes state to state, but there is a trend, no doubt, in national politics toward everybody being sent a ballot, and that's that. And when that's the case, the Democrats could easily clean up.
I want to ask you a question about that in a second, but first I want to take Bree's super chat here. This is why we need to focus on the secular and science part of the argument, as well as supporting women who keep their babies. There are groups that are doing this, but we need more. I completely agree. I think that if conservatives want to win the battle on abortion, they need to focus on culturally, not politically, because culturally I do actually think there's a lot of progress that can be made. There's different, or I know there's different organizations that will help women out financially. If finances are the only reason they're having an abortion, there are services like that, and that's what I think that conservatives should focus on. If they really want to prevent more abortions, then they need to get into the hearts and minds of people, not using the legislative pen to try to get their way. I want to go back to what you were saying about Florida and ballot harvesting and all of this stuff, though, because Charlie Kirk a couple of hours ago tweeted out something to the effect of, if the Democrats are going to harvest ballots, we should do it too. And we're going to gear up and have the most massive ballot harvesting initiative ever in 2024. And part of me was like, I like that they're thinking about this, but I also have to question with organizations like Turning Point USA, which takes in millions and millions and tens of millions of donations from conservatives every single year. Do you think an organization like Turning Point USA had any impact on getting youth voter turnout? And because my kind of opinion on it is that they take their money and they spend it on their big conferences and having basically a giant party, but it doesn't actually end up resulting in youth voter turnout. And a follow-up to that is, I guess so after the 2020 election, there was this Time magazine article that basically laid out exactly what the Democrats did to fortify the election in 2020. And there wasn't anything really illegal about it. They were just very strategic about where they were putting their resources and coordinating across these units and stuff like that. So number one, did Republicans effectively get out the youth voter turnout with their tens of millions of dollars invested in Turning Point USA? And follow up to that, what do they need to do before 2024?
Well, the first question is easier to answer than the second, but as far as the first one goes, no, of course, the whole Turning Point USA thing, it's not a scam. I don't think that's a good way of putting it, but it's
I would
also
agree.
yeah, it's not effective. I would say it falls something more in the way of a waste of time. And of course, that means money, lots of money in the case of Turning Point, considering how much it raises. I think that Turning Point is not really in line with the priorities of Zoomers or some millennials, and I think it's mainly targeted at Zoomers. And I think that's just sort of there as something to use as a reason for activism, which probably would have happened anyway. And then, of course, you said there are the massive conferences where people have a lot of fun. So I think Turning Point, if they want to do voter turnout measures, if they're able to do it, why not? And as long as there's no regulation that prevents them from doing so. But I think that it's not so simple as to say, this is getting into the second question about 2024 or the follow-up. It's not so simple as to say, well, the Democrats do this, so we're going to do it too. The Democrats have been doing this for several years. And the bottom line is that Republican voters are very hesitant to vote by mail. They do not trust the electoral system. They have good reason not to trust it. If you see what goes on in places like California and such, where I believe they found ballots that were by the side of a road in a ravine or whatever. I mean, it just gets kind of ridiculous after a point. But but a lot of Republicans are very leery about the electoral system in general. Now, in some cases, they shouldn't be. There are places like, for instance, Florida, that have very well-run elections. Even somewhere like Delaware, Joe Biden's home state, they have very well-run elections. There's no reason to live in fear of the election process. But in other places like California or Nevada, there's great reason to be afraid. So Republicans, unfortunately, are just going to have a negative impression, even if the voting system where they live is totally safe, of voting by mail. And that's going to make it rather difficult to say, hey, guys, we want you to request the ballot and turn them in, blah, blah, blah. It's just you just can't expect these voters to act in the same way the Democrats do. So basically, trying to be a new and improved version of the Democratic voter turnout machine isn't going to work. It's just a difference of what people believe from one party to the next. What the Republicans should do, though, is try to maximize vote by mail. But they also should really create as positive an impression as possible of in-person early voting. The GOP in Florida did that. The GOP in some other places did not do that. Some people in some states think anything other than election day is going to be, the vote's just going to be thrown into a shredder, and that's just not true. So I think that the GOP needs to really focus nationwide, wherever it's available, on maximizing in-person early voting turnout. That would be the key, and it certainly can do that. Even if it's busing people to the polls, literally, rents a Trailways bus and does that. But I would say that saying, well, the Democrats do this, so we're going to do that. It's if you're talking about your average Republican voter who doesn't trust the Postal Service, let alone his or her state secretary of state or local supervisor of elections, that dog's not going to hunt.
I agree. So I want to get into maybe some of the other reasons that I don't think that Republicans did as well as they would have hoped. And I think for me, one of the biggest problems that the Republicans have is I don't know what they stand for other than we're not Democrats. And, I remember I went to a Don Bolduc event in New Hampshire. And basically Don Bolduc's entire stump speech in New Hampshire is, I'm not a Democrat, vote for me. And I was
Mhm.
like, really, is that good enough? But I mean, the Republican Party, I really don't know what they stand for other than inflation is bad. Okay, I think we can all agree that inflation is bad. That's fine. But I don't know what they would do about it, especially since I think an argument could be made that part of the inflation problem that we're experiencing right now happened under Trump. It didn't actually happen under Biden. It
Mhm.
happened under Trump. And so do I really think the Republicans are going to come in and be the savior of inflation when they at least partially caused the problem in the first place? I don't think they made a good case for it. Would you agree that they didn't really have any proactive vision that they were trying to sell us?
Oh, I agree. It's just complaining about the present situation, hoping that people will infer if the other party gets in, then the problems will go away. The Republicans obviously did contribute to the inflationary crisis under Trump, although it was made much worse, needless to say, by Biden.
Yes.
It's what has to be done in order to combat inflation is it entails taking some extremely unpopular moves. I mean, obviously, the Fed hiking interest rates is one thing. I'm sure there could be more hikes to come, but it means cutting back on social spending. Uh, it would mean, I mean, maybe some radical stuff like selling off government land and investing that money in a way that would make the federal government more solvent. It would entail a lot of stuff. And obviously, this stuff is very unpopular. It means probably furloughing some federal workers. So it's not like cutting inflation is one, two, three. Even though it's the path to doing it is not really hard to gather. It's just that the practicality of doing it, like I said, is not one, two, three. So whichever party gets serious about tackling inflation, it's going to be doing stuff which is very, very unpopular indeed. It's it's not these are not things you could do and expect to run on them in election season and get a lot of public support, because a lot of people like, obviously they like cheaper, they like loans with low interest rates. But when one talks about the Fed's hiking interest rates, it's not so much the Fed, and this, I'm sure. Just
Mhm.
it's not like the Fed is issuing someone a loan is looking for a house. It has to do with lending, one might say, at a higher level that then boils down to or trickles down to influence more commonplace aspects of the economy. And the bottom line is that any party that tries to tackle inflation, it's going to be doing unpopular things. A lot of people want these. I mentioned cheaper loads. They obviously want to be able to have knowledge, and it's totally understandable that popular programs will be there if they ever need them, social programs, public spending programs. They also want national parks. They also want Department of Education grants for their local school district. They want all this stuff. If one cuts back on inflation, it means you're going to have to basically take a a sledgehammer to the existing fiscal arrangement, and the unpopularity that will be massive in the short run, even if in the long run it produces, a lower cost of goods. And also, there's another thing as well. Raising taxes is often done to combat inflation. The problem with that is that it creates a slowdown in the economy because people are going to be as economically, one might say, they're not going to have the same economic vitality if more and more of their money goes to the government, because they figure, well, what's the point of this? So it's difficult. It can be done theoretically that taxes are lowered actually to keep economic growth going, even as interest rates are hiked and all these other things that I mentioned happen. That is not necessarily an easy path, though, for a host of reasons. So, looking at the inflationary crisis, obviously both parties created it, but getting out of it, I think, is nothing that either party would want to do, because you just have to step on so many eggshells.
What are some of the other issues that you think impacted the Republican result in this election that we haven't talked about yet?
Well, there, I mean, I'm trying to think. I think a lot of people in the GOP were overconfident. Overconfidence was a big issue. They thought they had this
I
thing in the
agree.
bag. They were going to have it handed to them on a silver platter. So discipline on the campaign trail really didn't matter that much, because it wasn't a question of winning. It was a question of how much am I going to win by. And in that sort of situation, it's going to be the case that people make mistakes, totally needless mistakes, unforced errors. And I think the GOP did that with how it handled the campaign. I think that there is a real problem with uh, how Republicans relate to college-educated white women, and also obviously the shifting politics of this demographic. Which, I mean, this is it's trying to figure this out is like Chinatown in a manner of speaking. But the two things I would say have happened. I mean, a lot of things have happened, but two very important things have happened. The college-educated white vote, period, let alone among females, has shifted leftward over the last several years, the last decade, because it's a generational shift principally. Older college educated folks are dying off and they're being replaced by younger ones. And there are more younger people who've gone to college than older people. So it doesn't take a genius to see how impactful this shift is. And younger college educated individuals, number one, are pushed left because of their student debt. They don't want to live with the debt, and they want the government to forgive the debt, and that's that. But also on social or cultural issues, they're pushed left because over the last decade, there's been this ascendancy of wokeness on college campuses, to the extent that now a lot of younger people don't care for freedom of speech, expression, or assembly. And that's a big deal. So one cannot expect that, particularly, I mean, it's more felt among females than males, even though it's something experienced among both sexes, but particularly with college educated females, and it seems to be highly acute for whatever region among college educated white females. There really is no interest in anything that's not of the trendy left, or even harder than that, like talking about the woke totalitarian left. It's difficult for the GOP to message to these gals. It's also almost impossible for a lot of these gals to imagine not supporting the Democrats, because obviously identity politics is attendant to trendy leftism and wokeness, and the identity politics craze holds that Republicans or non-Democrats, moreover, are evil people, and the Democrats, even if they're flawed, are the only party of goodness. So your group is supported by the Democrats. You can disagree with where the Democrats stand on any given issue. On the whole, this is the party of your group, so you're going to vote for this party come hell or high water, and that's that. And trying to shake this image out of the minds of people who hold it's a very difficult thing, particularly among younger women who obviously are more consensus minded, more communal minded than young men tend to be. This identity politics has an immensely powerful pull. So the Democrats have really honed in on identity politics as this demographic, college educated whites, have shifted leftward. And the GOP at the same time has been under Trump, it didn't do too badly, even though during his presidency, the GOP hemorrhaged so many college educated voters, especially whites. But it's not like he went out of his way to be offensive to younger people, like calling them names, blah, blah, blah. Didn't tell the young people to get off his damn lawn or call them hippies. You know what I mean? But the abortion issue, which is not a Trump issue, it's more of a broadly GOP issue at this point. That issue definitely, I think, added fuel to the fire of these younger college-educated women, especially white ones, supporting the Democrats no matter what. I don't think there's much of a swing vote anymore, but I am certain that without Roe being axed, there would have been more younger college-educated women voting Republican, even if it's only like 5% in each state. That still matters because it could be the margin of victory in the sort of extremely tight races we've been seeing in this election cycle. So the GOP has this problem. It has a problem broadly with college-educated voters, specifically with college-educated whites, but absolutely with college-educated white women. And the GOP did not handle this very well. It's a huge issue for them.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. I remember seeing a different tweet on election night, and I think this one may have been like from Will Chamberlain or something, where they basically said, if only unmarried women couldn't vote, then we would win. And I'm like, that is exactly the wrong attitude. You need to try to understand why these unmarried college educated women are not voting for you. And I think it's everything that you talked about. I also think I'm going to say something that's really unpopular for the Republicans and the GOP base, I think that they have a role to play in this, because I do think that you are absolutely right when you say that, college educated white women and college educated people in general do perceive the Republicans to be the party of evil. Now, that comes from the education system, I think, that they've been in, the media that they're consuming, and all of that. But I also think that there is something to be said for the fact that if you say something online on social media, Facebook, Twitter, what have you, that is considered to be leftist or Democrat or any of these things, like you're commenting on an article, and if you all of a sudden get attacked and called all sorts of awful names by people that are obviously presenting as conservative, whether it be like libtard or they're bashing your looks or any of these things, those tactics, and I see them far more from Republicans right now than I do from Democrats, those tactics piss people off. And they're not going to, if you're insulting them and spitting in their face, they're not ever going to vote for you no matter how good your policies are. And I don't think that Republican voters have really kind of wrapped their heads around the fact that every time they insult someone because they say something they don't like, or they have a haircut they don't like, or their appearance is not kind of like the buttoned up, like, kind of professional appearance that conservatives really value, you're losing their vote forever if you do this stuff, and yet they just keep on doing it. And so I do think that the average person does have a role to play more than they might think that they do, in terms of changing public perception of what it means to be a Republican, what it means to be a conservative. And that's going to be a difficult thing, I think, for a lot of college-educated Democrat women to get over, in terms of wrapping their heads around not voting for the Democratic Party. I want to take this super chat from Cyrus Cherry. The deniers and January 6th did it. I'm from South Carolina, and our Republicans are shady towards minorities unless you are a BT type. By the way, I saw your reaction vid. I tried shrooms 4 weeks ago. Best choice of my life. Well, I'm glad you had that experience, Cyrus, and I appreciate the super chat. So I want to shift gears a little bit, and I want to ask about one state specifically. And it's not Florida. It's Arizona. What happened in Arizona? I was not personally surprised when Blake Masters lost, but I was honestly very surprised about Carrie Lake. What do you think happened?
Yeah, I actually thought both would win, but I thought Carrie Lake would win easily. Masters was, I said when my official prediction, it was going to be a tough call, but I did think he would wind up pulling it out. But I think that what happened in Arizona is nothing that you can even say it happened. It's still happening. It's a shift in demographics, and it's about. I mean, there's the shift in ancestral demographics. There's also the shift in education-related demographics. There's the shift in economic demographics. You pick a situation and it's shifting, and none of these shifts benefit the GOP. In Arizona, the Hispanic populace there didn't go as anywhere near as Republican as it did in Florida or even California, interestingly enough. But the Republicans in Arizona also have a problem within their own ranks, because there is a feud within the party. You have the more traditional McCainiac wing, which is thought of by the media as being quote unquote respectable, and no question it comes off as more polished than some of the MAGA types who Carrie Lake strongly aligned herself with, that are very brash, outspoken, in some cases embarrassing. But the McCainiacs are more dangerous, because these people basically want to light the world on fire for their vision of quote unquote democracy, if they believe in that at all. I mean, it's tied up with large corporations that make money off of bloodshed, and these people basically don't give a damn about anything other than their ideology and making money off of it all the while, and being quote unquote respectable, even as what they do literally kills people. So the McCainiac wing is definitely the more dangerous of the two, and the more destructive, but it is still there. And even though McCain is dead now, so quite a few years, it's not gone away, and I don't think it's going away. And this McCainiac wing is the distinct minority of the Arizona Republican ranks. However, its members will not vote for someone like Lake or Masters. They will either not vote, or they'll actually vote for the Democrat. I know a lot of them voted for Mark Kelly. And at this point, I don't even know if it's about issues so much as it is just a hatred for what the GOP has become, because a lot of folks folks still want it to be like, the McCain, what was their heyday, wasn't a heyday for anyone else. But, these people have a highly emotional attachment to that point in time, and they're not moving beyond it. So even though a lot of them by now are effectively Democrats or Democratic leaning independents, they still keep the GOP registration to screw with the party as much in primaries as they can. And then a lot of them will vote for any Republican they dislike, which is overwhelming. There's an overwhelming chance that the Republican on the ballot is going to be one they dislike because, like I said, their numbers are not big. So this absolutely is sinking the Arizona Republicans. There were close races in Arizona, particularly the gubernatorial election. And if the McCainiac Republicans had been on board for Kari Lake, she would have won. Blake Masters still would have lost, probably. But he would have been in the situation that Kari Lake is in, basically, where it's this tiny, tiny loss. And it wasn't a big loss that he incurred, but still a loss. But the Republicans have a lot of problems in Arizona, and I'm not confident that they'll be able to win it in 2024 or at any point beyond that. Demographics there are shifting, and then there is this nasty intra-party feud.
It's just such a shame because Kari Lake was such a good candidate, and it's my opinion, and I want to hear what you have to say about this. I think the GOP as a party needs to do two critical things before 2024. Number one, they need to put Kari Lake in charge of actually training Republican candidates on how to run for office and how to interact with the media. And I don't know exactly how they do that. She downloads all of her tips and tricks and actually teaches people how to do this, and maybe they workshop it or whatever. But I think they need to do that. And then I think they need to put Scott Presler on the payroll and make it Scott Presler's job to train 100 more people that are just like Scott Presler. Because I really think, Scott Presler got very sick right before the election. He's thankfully out of the hospital now, but there's one Scott Presler in the country, and he has done more to lift up Republican voters than almost anyone else in the country has over the last several years. And I really think it's a shame that the GOP has not utilized him more to say, okay, we can't just have it be you because you went into the hospital. And we need more people just like you. I think that could have a monumental impact.
Oh, for sure. I'm a big fan of Scott Presler. I've stated as much publicly. I think he should be RNC chair. I think that McDaniel, though, is not. It's not like she generated the problem. The problem is more institutional. But Presler is someone who I think could turn things around. I would imagine that he would take the job if it were offered to him, but I don't know that they're going to offer it to him. I think McDaniel's intent on hanging around for as long as possible. And like I said, I don't dislike her personally or politically, but he certainly, I think, would be superior in the RNC chairmanship. Now, I think when it comes to Kari Lake, she was a very good candidate. She knew how to deal with the media better than I think any Republican that's come along that I can recall. I would say that she should obviously run for office again, and she would be a very good strategist for the national GOP. I think that I think that the situation in Arizona with those mail-in ballots absolutely was disastrous for her. If not for those atypical Democratic voters getting motivated, she could have won even without the McCainiacs. But it's water under the bridge at this point. But no, she was a very good candidate. She had the most comprehensive, consistent, intellectually substantial, emotionally satisfying anti-woke message of any candidate that I've seen running on the Republican side ever. She really got it down pat, and she's good on other things too. So yeah, the GOP definitely should keep her around, and hopefully she'll run for office again. It is unfortunate that she lost, and I didn't expect her to. I was quite surprised.
What were some other races that were surprising to you this year?
I am surprised. Well, I was going to say that I was going to talk about a few House races, but surprised it might be too strong of a word. I am legitimately surprised that Oz lost in Pennsylvania.
Oh, I knew Fetterman was going to win. I knew it.
Really?
I did. I think it was more gut instinct than anything else. Maybe I was projecting what would be the most hilarious possible outcome of the 2022 midterms, but I really thought that Fetterman was going to win.
Yeah, it was postal balloting once again that doomed the GOP here, in addition to demographics, because a lot of people already voted by mail in Pennsylvania before the debate that Fetterman tanked in, and that, I mean, the election was. We didn't know it then, but considering how many people voted by mail relative to how many voted on election day, it was basically over by that point. So
Wow.
yeah, it was really it was really something else that he was able to win despite the debate performance. But considering how Pennsylvania holds its elections, it's not a surprise. If Pennsylvania did not do this postal balloting nonsense, if it did in-person voting with only excuse absentee postal balloting being allowed, I think Oz would have won. But that's not the way it works in Pennsylvania. So, it's water under the bridge once again. But I was legitimately surprised to see Oz lose. I thought he ran a very decent campaign. It wasn't perfect, but Fetterman's was absolutely dreadful. But the Democrats there know how to turn people out, and they also have shifts going on in the Philadelphia suburbs. Although Oz did not underperform there for a Republican, he didn't do all too badly. He certainly didn't have an embarrassing showing. Who did have an embarrassing showing was Doug Mastriano, who ran for
Yeah,
governor. I
for
mean,
real.
oh yeah, that was like a clown car candidacy. He took the most extreme position on abortion, and then he started with this religious stuff, and it got to the point where they were doing, it was not a Nazi salute or anything like that, but it was like a Christian salute that looked like a Nazi salute. It was just this really, really, really bizarre stuff, and he dragged Oz down, absolutely no question about it. He motivated
Mm.
Democratic turnout that would not have been there, even with postal balloting being what it is. If Oz were running with a normal Republican gubernatorial nominee, Oz could have won, or it could have been something like Kerry Lake's loss, where it's this tiny margin of error. But I think that Mastriano is a perfect example of how the GOP screws itself up, and it cannot afford to keep nominating these candidates that nominate a small segment of the base, because it's not even all Republican voters. You're talking about what he won by, which is a narrow plurality of the in terms of the overall Republican electorate in Pennsylvania, he won by a narrow plurality. Obviously, he did well among people who turned out for that specific primary. But the fact of the matter is that by running these niche candidates like Mastriano, the GOP dooms itself. But unfortunately, there are a lot of people in the GOP base. They're like people in the Democratic base. They care about being pandered to. They care about having their pet cause be elevated, if it means electoral doom, and someone who they disagree with 100% of the time being elected, as opposed to someone on the Republican side that they would disagree with maybe 20% of the time. This happens. There's a lot of purism and absolutism in the base of each party, and one sees with the Mastriano candidacy how this unfortunate tendency doomed the GOP, at least in Pennsylvania.
Well, I've thought a lot about Pennsylvania, and I think another way they may have doomed themselves is with Kathy Barnett, to be honest. Now, Kathy Barnett
Oh
came
yeah,
in third
sure.
in the primary, but you could make the argument. I mean, Rick Grinnell went on a 3-day Twitter tirade against Kathy Barnett. Sean Hannity was openly antagonistic towards her. Greg Kelly was just a total lunatic, and it felt like the Trump base did everything they could to prevent Kathy from getting anywhere close to that nomination. And I'd like your opinion on this. I think I'm not saying it's a surefire bet, but I think that she would have done better than Oz had she actually been the GOP nominee. She's someone that I could have seen go into Philadelphia and maybe win over some voters there, go into Pittsburgh, maybe win over some more voters there. I think she could have had a decent showing. What do you think?
I think she probably would have done worse than Oz. Her views on religion and some social issues were highly off-putting, even though she perhaps would have been able to do more of a minority appeal, which would have been interesting to see how that went. I think that what happened was that the Republicans, as you said, really, piled down on her because they were nervous that she would not endorse Oz. First of all, they nervous she'd win the primary, and when she lost it by such a narrow margin, they were nervous she would not endorse Oz. And so they really wanted her to unify the GOP. And she did endorse Oz eventually, very tepidly. But by that point, this was another issue. Pennsylvania division within the state Republican ranks. The division was already there, and the damage was done. I think that it is very, very hard hard to see how the Republicans win in Pennsylvania going forward, given the postal balloting situation and the demographic changes. But Barnett may have been able to do more appeal to minorities than Oz was. Maybe not, but she could have been. I think she would have alienated more people, though. I think she would have lost probably not as much as Mastriano, maybe by about 6 or so points. But in any case, Pennsylvania is just getting harder and harder for the GOP. It's some might say New Hampshire is as well. Although I think New Hampshire is sort of its own thing. It's kind of hard to judge it by the standards of New England, or certainly not the Rust Belt. But I'm often wondering about how winnable it is for Republicans there, because obviously in this go around they did quite pathetically. Even Sununu didn't win by as much as I thought he would. He won by less than DeSantis did. But all the same, there is a very strong GOP apparatus in New Hampshire. I believe the state legislature there is still Republican.
Well, it might end up in a tie. I think the issue with the state. Actually, I heard about it earlier today. There are so many state House races in New Hampshire that are being decided by less than 10 votes. So they're having to recount everything, and it's 200 for the Republicans right now, 199 for the Democrats, with one race left to be decided. So it could legitimately end up in a tie. But I think with New Hampshire, with the GOP, I actually think the GOP or apparatus in New Hampshire is awful. I think it's awful. And part of the problem is for them that they're going to have to grapple with is the libertarian presence in New Hampshire. And there are a lot of Liberty Republicans that will not go along with the traditional GOP candidates. I think nominating Caroline Leavitt was a horrible idea because the only people that liked Caroline Leavitt were hardcore Trump people that loved that she was young and worked for Trump. And it was no one else really liked her. And she was doing these videos online that didn't make her look like the most intelligent person in the world. And so I think that was a very big problem for them. Chris Pappas didn't even need to do anything, really. I think that race was lost on its own merit. In CD2, I look at who they nominated. They basically nominated the guy whose turn it was because he didn't get to have the nomination last time. So they set it up for him this time. But they could have had an amazing candidate in Lily Tang Williams that I think would have actually done really well and would have given Annie Custer a run for their money. But they didn't do it. And then insofar as the Senate race, I mean, Don Bolduc was in the last week of the election, I don't know if you caught this. So in the debate that Don Bolduc had with Maggie Hassan, he hoaxed an assault in the parking lot where he went on the debate stage and said, I was assaulted by a libertarian and isn't all this political violence awful? And then he went all over conservative media saying I was the victim of political violence. Well, the problem is, and I was actually there, I saw it happen right in front of me, but the libertarians in New Hampshire record everything. And there was video of multiple angles showing very clearly that Don Bolduc was not assaulted. And it wasn't the deciding factor because Don Bolduc lost all on his own in New Hampshire, but that moment for the libertarian population in New Hampshire basically put a big target on Don Bolduc to say, we might not like Maggie Hassan, but you are not going to lie about us on national media. And that, I think, did actually cost him a significant amount of the Liberty votes in New Hampshire that he maybe otherwise could have gotten. But ultimately, I know that for a lot of people in New Hampshire, they didn't really see Maggie Hassan as all that bad. It was kind of they were basically the same candidate. And I think it may have been go with the devil you know versus the devil you don't sort of thing.
Yeah, I absolutely think that's what it was. Bolduc was simply not a good candidate. What else can you say? He was not a good candidate or anything close to that.
Right.
Certainly out of step with the sensibilities of most New Hampshire voters. And I did hear about the hoax thing, although I didn't pay much attention to it because I already thought he was going to lose. So, to me, it was just sort of icing on the cake. But I'm not surprised to hear that something like this would happen. It's kind of crazy that he would do something like that, especially as a retired general. But, whatever. So I think that in New Hampshire, there is, I would say, a split between factions. There are the traditional sort of Rockefeller Republicans. Then you have the Liberty Republicans, like you said, the very doctrinaire libertarian ones. And then you have the MAGA Republicans. And it's not as bad as in Arizona, where, like I said, there's a blood feud at this point. But there definitely is a feud. And the Democrats in New Hampshire certainly have their moderates and progressives. Has to be more of a moderate or whatever passes for one. And then then you have like the Bernie Bros. But the Democrats, I think, were able to unify more than the Republicans in New Hampshire, and it creates some interesting turns of events, such as the 2022 election cycle. Leave it, or I never thought she was a very good candidate. I remember when she won, she was like one of the first Zoomer Republicans to be nominated for anything, and people were gushing over her. I didn't think that she presented herself well. She, for whatever reason, took some bizarre stance on the abortion issue, which for a college-educated Zoomer female, that was quite shocking. Actually, she would do that in a place like New Hampshire. It's not the backwoods of Alabama, but she did this all the same. And that she lost to me was totally unsurprising. And I thought the Republicans would do much. I think that the House would take so long to call. I'll put it that way. Even though I did predict that the GOP obviously would take the House, my official prediction after it became, I didn't do one beforehand about how many seats the GOP would get, but my official prediction was that the Republicans would get between 222 and 225 U.S. House seats. I did that a few days after it became clear that the Republicans were going to have to wait a while to have their victory called. And a lot of people were saying, well, the Democrats could take the U.S. House. I never thought that was going to happen. So I think the GOP will make it up to 222. I think that's very doable for them. Obviously, the more they have, the better for a host of reasons. But a close House majority might make it so they're more disciplined. Who knows? But a large majority, I think, would make them rest on their laurels and be very lackadaisical, which they probably would have been if they got the sort of victory they anticipated. But so there could be some really good attributes of a small majority. But anyhow, now that that's out the window, talking about the situation in New Hampshire, yeah. So Leave It was not a surprise to me that she lost, and I think that in the future, the New Hampshire Republicans are going to have to obviously, make their apparatus match that of the Democrats, a very tall order. But it's not a big state; it shouldn't be that difficult. It's not like, say, Florida, but here obviously the Republicans totally outclass the Democrats when it comes to their election season apparatus. But I would also say they're going to have to deal with their factional issues. That's a big deal. It shouldn't be too hard though, because you would think that the Rockefeller Republicans, libertarians, and MAGA folks could at least come together on some common principles. It's not like we're talking about natural enemies here.
It does kind of feel in New Hampshire specifically like a little bit of a pissing contest, if I'm
Mhm.
honest, between the different factions. I mean, and what the libertarians have said to the Republicans, leading up to the election and now reminding them afterwards is essentially, if you nominate better candidates, we will vote for you. But if you nominate these horrible candidates, you're not going to get our votes. And there were candidates in the primary. There was Timmy Baxter, who is a Liberty Republican that was running for the nomination that Caroline Levitt got. He absolutely could have gotten Liberty votes. There was Bruce Fenton in the Senate primary that we actually the LPNH had a Senate candidate, and he even said he would drop out if Bruce Fenton got the nomination because he's like a crypto guy and we really liked him. And I just think the GOP in New Hampshire specifically is again making some bad choices and then they really think this is the challenge with New Hampshire Republicans is they really think that the more liberty-minded people are just going to fall right in line after the primary and vote for whoever. And I do think in the last week leading up to the election, it was actually kind of shocking to see how many, there were so many Republican meltdowns in New Hampshire when they realized that the libertarians were serious when we said we weren't going to vote for your candidates. And I think that they just really hadn't thought about it. They thought everyone was going to fall in line. And I hope that they take learnings from it and nominate better people next time. And so maybe we don't have this problem. I do want to take this super chat from Cyrus Cherry. And Cyrus, I saw your other one too, but you're setting me up for a question I want to ask. So we're going to do this one first. Cyrus says, please be more specific. What made Oz so bad? He came off as a salesman. I don't think that hate is ever explained. I think for me, what I've heard from people in Pennsylvania is they thought Oz was a carpetbagger and they didn't trust him. And they didn't like Fetterman either. It was like you're picking between like two horrible candidates, essentially, for a lot of people. But I just don't. I think they saw Oz as an outsider. They didn't know why he was running for Senate in Pennsylvania, and I think a lot of people didn't trust him. Any thoughts, Joseph?
Yeah, Yeah, no, I think that that's absolutely correct. I don't have any disagreement with that. Even though Oz presented himself well, he did have these issues which you brought up, and they're not minor issues. So yeah, I think that's basically it.
All right, I want to go to Cyrus's other super chat, and this just teed me up so perfectly. Does your guest think Trump running is a mistake? If Trump had the McCain voters, Arizona would have been his. I don't think traditional conservatives want the theatrics this time. Trump fatigue. Well, we now know that Trump is running again. And I have to admit, like, I watched the announcement live on my channel yesterday. I was a little shocked, quite frankly, at how lackluster the announcement was. It was almost like Trump tried to do this huge buildup and then he just kept talking and saying, honestly, really ill advised things. And then it was all of a sudden he's like, and I'm running for president. Yay. And it didn't even seem like his heart was in it. So, what do you think about Trump running for president again, and how that might play out?
Well, to address one part of of what was asked before I get to the big thing,
Ah,
more traditional conservatism is not going to win today. That's the bottom line. It might do better in Arizona, although then you'd alienate a lot of the MAGA voters, so it might not do better there. But it would win back the McCainiacs. But nationally, that dog is not going to hunt. That's the bottom line. There is no longer a demographic for whether you define conservatism as being McCainism, Shrubism, that's George W. Bushism, or Reaganism. There really isn't a George H.W. Bushism. He was so inconsequential. But regardless of how you define it, there really is no appetite for traditional conservatism now. The GOP before Trump came along was something. Even though it had its U.S. House majority, it had no vision. It was rudderless. It was frustrating. It focused on issues that the donors, very, very influential, wealthy donors wanted, and it shafted basically a lot of other people who just voted for it because the Democrats were that much worse. That was the Republican Party before Trump. Now, since he's come along, he has made the GOP much more relatable to its voters and much more accountable to its voters. That's why so many Republicans have lost their primaries in recent years. That's not a coincidence. It really has made the GOP much more responsive to the interests of those who vote for it, which is a good thing. So, yeah, I think that traditional conservatism simply does not have a base for itself in national elections. In some states, it might. But nationally, I think that's just gone. Now, in terms of Trump running, I think it's an inevitable thing. I think he's probably next to DeSantis. He would be I'm quite sure that he'd be the better candidate. I say he's probably the best the GOP has, unless you count Glenn Youngkin. But I'm not sure that any Republican now would be able to win because of the mail balloting rules in key swing states and changing demographics. That's the thing. I don't think that the GOP is a Trump problem. I think the GOP has a demographic problem and a vote by mail problem. And Trump, I would say, is probably best suited, aside from Youngkin, to win in 24. Even though I don't think any of these people would be favored, I can't stress that enough. And I certainly don't think that, say, someone like DeSantis would fare better than Trump would. DeSantis, he is my governor. I've known about him since he ran for Congress 10 years ago. I knew about him long before most of his present fans ever had any conception of who he was. DeSantis is a political chameleon. He does go with whatever he believes the current thing among the conservative base is. And he's not someone who is as forthright as Trump. And that means he's not able to relate to as many atypical voters as Trump does, whether you're talking about marginal Republicans or, far more importantly, independents in places like the Rust Belt, which the GOP absolutely has to win. And also DeSantis has done many good things for Florida in terms of the environment. He's actually been outstanding. Whether or not he believes in any of the things he winds up doing is another question, but he has actually done very good stuff for the state. But he has compiled an environmental record that is no doubt, no joke, to the left of Joe Biden's, because Florida has a very big environmental lobby. A lot of people don't realize that. Here, it's not. It definitely is not a free for all when it comes to doing anything which relates to the environment. One could be out trying to build a house and some snail that's thought of as endangered is discovered on the property, and the state shuts the whole thing down for months until such time as the matter can be properly ascertained by the relevant authorities, blah, blah, blah. So the matter not can be ascertained as matter until the matter can be decided upon by the relative authorities, excuse me. So that's really what it is. And it works for the state. And DeSantis has played no small role in keeping the state as green as possible. The problem is, it's not a problem for Florida, but it'd be a problem for the people I'm about to address. If he went to Texas, which he'd have to do, or to the Rust Belt, which he'd have to do, trying to appeal to the people there, he unilaterally banned fracking and offshore drilling. He might, yeah, absolutely.
I didn't realize that. Wow.
Absolutely. Yes, I've read the executive order. I was one of the first things he did. So it's good for the state, but he would have a tough time saying, well, this is bad for my state, but it's good for you. Typically, the Trumpian voter who is, marginally Republican or actually independent, does not like what it perceives as double talk. That's probably the thing that alienates it most. Trump, whatever one wants to say about him, he's very clear about what he believes, and his voters, this is what endears him to his voting base. DeSantis is not clear about what he believes. He changes his position a lot, and he often issues non-answers, whether it be on abortion, which he did in the debate with Charlie Crist, a debate that he should have won, but it was a draw, which was pathetic because Crist is no great debater. But then DeSantis also was very non-committal about having received the vaccine, and he actually changed his approach to the vaccine. He was a big fan of it very early, and then he became a vaccine skeptic. So, I mean, this is, yeah, DeSantis he's not a bad governor. He's actually been a very good governor. I voted for him. However, if once taken to the national stage, there are going to be problems. People cannot expect another Ronald Reagan or a Trump that's sort of cleansed of Trump's inevitable self-created problems. DeSantis has his own issues. So I think Trump running is a good thing because I think he is the only candidate that can inspire turnout, which could really get the Republicans to 270, aside from perhaps Glenn Youngkin. And I need to keep saying that because I do think Youngkin absolutely has presidential potential. I would not vote for Youngkin over Trump because I don't want a long, drawn-out primary that only benefits the Democrats. I would say just, end the primary early, make it a clear Trump victory so we all can move along rather than, having a sort of thing like Hillary and Bernie. That's my point of view, but I certainly don't dislike Youngkin. And I think he's much more clearer and consistent than DeSantis is. And he's also someone who has a record that is more limited than DeSantis's, obviously, because Youngkin wasn't in public office before he became governor of Virginia. DeSantis was in Congress for not 10 years, excuse me. He was there from 2012 to 2013, technically took office in 2019. So that's I can't even believe I'm getting. It's 6 years. 6 years. He was there for 6 years, and it's not bad, but it's not great that he has all of these votes that are in his past. It's not like I think he did stuff that should really be held with great shame, but certainly there are things there that would be used against him in a primary, and the Democrats would then use that for the general election. Or even if it weren't used against him in the primary, they'd use it against him in a general election, his voting record. Youngkin being a governor that's not been in office for all that long, but he's did a very good job, much less to use against him. Obviously, there's a hell of a lot to use against Donald Trump, much more than DeSantis or, of course, Youngkin. The thing of it is that it's basically all neutralized by now because Trump is so well known. He's an open book, and people just sort of shrug it off. He gets away with stuff because of that no one else would. And also it's because he's such a well-known public figure before he ran for president. So, yeah, Trump running in 2024 is a good thing for the GOP, I think. Now, as far as it's not a perfect thing, though, I certainly don't think that he's some sort of savior for the party, although he did deliver it out of a terrible, terrible, terrible time before he like I said, the Romney-Ryan era was really, really bad. And it's good that Trump moved the GOP out of that. Now, as far as his announcement, I think he wanted to keep it as subdued as possible. He did go on a bit. I would have told him to keep it to 30 minutes, and that's it.
Yeah.
That's all. But as we all know, with Trump, he goes off script. He does ramble. This is part of his honesty, though, that endears him to people because he just says what he believes. And you really, if you disagree with it, one can't say that he's BSing you because it's what he believes, and that's that. He didn't make any flubs, which is good. But I didn't think his announcement speech was bad at all. It just went on for too long. I was waiting for him to say something that would be, oh God, not this again. But it didn't happen. But it should have been 30 minutes, and that should have been that. He should not have made it more high energy. That would have been a mistake. Obviously, at this point, the Republicans only getting this narrow House majority, and the Republicans getting whipped in many other places in the midterm. Trump being too high energy would have looked a little strange. It would have looked like he didn't take note of what just happened. You certainly got the impression from what he said that he did take note of what happened, that he was cognizant of the GOP's poor showing, and that he wanted to do stuff to remedy, that, or to prevent such a thing from happening again for 2024. So I don't think his speech was bad, but it was intentionally lower energy, and it would have been good for him to really, act like he's at one of his rallies. Something else I thought that was great, he passed my essential test of his speech, which was, is he going to bring up this abortion issue and say, I defended life, I got Roe v. Wade overturned? If he did that, then I would think, oh no, this is going to be, very bad before it really begins. He didn't. He didn't talk about abortion at all. That was major. Because obviously that means he got the message. He was talking about abortion, not constantly, but he would bring it up at rallies. And I think he got the message that this isn't a good message. And I was very pleased by that. And it shows me that he would be running on more important stuff in 2024. I also think that the issues he did bring up were very good. It boiled down to cost of living, to quality of life. And these are the issues the GOP needs to run on, not, get wading into the weeds of these long time moral abstractions like abortion. So yeah, Trump's speech definitely could have been better. It was not bad though. It was subdued, which I liked. And I have to say that the optics of it at that massive ballroom at Mar-a-Lago were absolutely outstanding. That was it looked like not a presidential announcement speech, but like somebody announcing an upcoming coronation. It was it was really well done. I said they should hold the RNC, a scaled down version of it, at Mar-a-Lago.
Oh, they should.
That would be beautiful. I really think it would be nice.
Yeah, I think, I agree with so much of what you said. And I have to say, like, I was pleasantly surprised in some respects, just I'm going to call it the Trump magic, in that, I'd really thought up until this point, I was like, DeSantis is probably the smart choice for the GOP. Trump is the entertaining choice. DeSantis is the smart choice. But I have to say, as I was watching the announcement, I started to feel that Trump magic, the energy. I was like, oh my God, Trump is back. This is going to be great. And you start to get a little nostalgic about, the time when Trump was still in office, and just how insane the media went, and how Trump would just like brush them off and not pay them mind and not give in to them and not back down. And I said, you know what? A lot of people are going to be nostalgic about this, and they're going to remember why they liked Trump in the first place. And he's been, it's not that he hasn't been out there. He's been on Truth Social and stuff, but Trump really has not been out there in the media, except if people are seeking him out. And I do think that it's reminding people why they liked him in the first place. And I think above all else, Trump is a symbol for a lot of things. He's a symbol for disruption. He's a symbol for an outsider coming in, and he's a symbol of someone who isn't going to take the establishment nonsense or the woke nonsense. And I think that really will be the thing that pushes him to the nomination if he wants it, at the end of the day. I do still question if Trump really wants to do this or not, or if he's doing it for his own ego, which I think that we cannot dismiss that possibility because it's Trump. But I think it's going to be entertaining, if nothing else, and I'm looking forward to it. I also think that Chris Sununu is going to throw his hat into the ring for 2024. And to be honest, nothing would please me more than to watch Chris Sununu lose in New Hampshire, because I do not think he would win against Trump or DeSantis.
No, I agree, and I don't dislike Chris Sununu, by the way. But no, I agree that he would not win against Trump. It would be ridiculous for him to run. I don't even know how many serious opponents Trump will have. So People say it's going to be a crowded primary. I think that what they're going to do is wait between now and New Year's and get not the BS public polls that we see, which are absolutely terrible in this cycle as
they were
well.
so bad, so bad.
Awful. This is the third cycle in a row where they've been just completely missing the mark. They're actually pretty bad. And now they come to think about it, 2014 as well. But anyway, but the fact of the matter is, people say, ooh, this public poll shows DeSantis leading Trump by 0.2 of a percentage point in such and such state. No, those are the polls that matter. The polls that matter are the ones that are taken privately. They're highly accurate, even though they're not perfect. And I think that various potential challengers to Trump are going to be commissioning private polling between now and New Year's to see just what sort of hold he has over the GOP. And if the hold is not big, I mean, the hold is going to be there one way or another. It's just a question of how large it is. Then I think you'd see more people running against him. But if the hold is inconsiderable, which I imagine it is, maybe it's like 30% or so that wouldn't vote for Trump, I don't think you're going to see many opponents to him at all. I could be wrong, but I don't think it's going to be an especially boisterous primary season. There will be some people who run against him just for name recognition, probably. But I don't know. I mean, I could be off here. This is not a prediction I can make with any great degree of accuracy. Obviously, it's way too early. But I think that I get the impression that Trump is not going to have a very difficult primary season. If Sununu ran against him, that would be unfortunate, but I think Sununu definitely would lose to Trump. Sununu should have ran for the U.S. Senate this year instead of,
We all thought he was going to. Yeah,
I did too.
Surprised. Yeah.
It's crazy. I don't know why. Why? Because obviously it opened the door for that maniac Bulger. So it's really nuts that Sununu didn't take his chance to advance his political career. He could have won. I think it would have been a narrow victory. Now, obviously, hindsight being 2020, I would have thought he'd had a massive victory before the election, but after it now, I think he probably won by like 2 or so points. But that he didn't run was a big mistake, and I don't think he's going to be able to advance his political career by taking on Donald Trump.
See, I think he actually thought that he was advancing his political career by staying governor and being kind of like this governor of the purple state to show that he can work with both sides and, run the number one free state in the country, which he likes to take credit for, but is really not his responsibility at all. But so, I mean, we'll see how it works out for him. I don't know. I definitely think he's going to run, whether he does it in 2024 or 2028. I guess we'll see. I want to take this super chat from Cyrus. And again, thank you so much for the questions today, Cyrus. Trump is a media genius. He knew the country wasn't in the mood for yelling. He needs Kellyanne Conway again. I would absolutely agree with that. Does your guest think the GOP needs to get on board with cannabis legalization? If not, they'll turn other states blue. I absolutely think that cannabis legalization is such an easy win for the GOP. It's kind of like it's like the abortion issue for Democrats, or it's like student loans for Democrats, or any of these issues that really would drive the opinion, I think, of a lot of voters. But I know this is true in New Hampshire. The GOP just keeps fighting legalization, and I'm like, bro, I can drive 20 minutes over the border to Massachusetts. This makes no sense at all. And I think a lot of people feel that way. How do you feel about the GOP getting behind that nationally?
I think it should have been done a while ago. This is another issue that's dragged out too long, damaging the Republicans. This is an issue that wins in places that one wouldn't expect, like Missouri. Obviously, they have this bizarre ban on abortion, but now they just legalized marijuana for recreational purposes. So I think that marijuana should be totally descheduled. People should be able to have it as long as they're above a certain age, obviously. And not use it while they're driving or operating heavy machinery. And that's that. There really does not have to be any even conversation about this. Unfortunately, a lot of Republicans are living probably like in the 1950s when marijuana was said to, I think, make people more aggressive and somehow make them morally degenerate or whatever the propaganda was. No, I think marijuana legalization is a no-brainer. It should be done everywhere. The feds should take it off the Schedule 1. And it's that should be all, and the GOP should have no opposition to this. But of course, Republican voters don't even have a lot of opposition to this, which is why it's passing in all these places that are very conservative. So it's this is a no-brainer issue, I think.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Well, as we wrap up the stream, Joseph, I just wanted to kind of open the floor. Are there any other issues that you would like to kind of explore today or thoughts you'd like to share with everyone?
I would say that this next presidential election cycle is probably going to be the most depressing in modern memory. That's my point of view. I think that there will be obviously a lot of anti-Trump hatred that's thrown out there from different angles. I do think that the Department of Justice will probably civilly, not criminally, but civilly prosecute Trump, design in a way that's designed to
Mm.
destroy his public image, and that would probably tie Trump during election season. But I don't think it would damper voter enthusiasm for him because his supporters are going to back him regardless. I think that there's just going to be a lot of negativity, not much of a positive vision stated by the Democrats. Trump will try to articulate a positive vision, but he'll obviously have to respond to the negative ads. So I think you're going to see a lot of negativity. Also, of course, from people in the GOP who don't want Trump to be the nominee again. You're already seeing the Murdoch media go on the anti-Trump train, which is not surprising, but it's kind of stupid as well because it's obviously they don't have such sway over Republican voters. But I think that this presidential election cycle will be a very depressing one. I also think that the GOP has a unique opportunity to make itself more approachable to a lot of different voters. Hopefully, this lesson about the abortion nightmare will be heard. I certainly think Trump heard it, and more people have to hear it. That's the thing. One thing I liked about Trump's speech was that by focusing on these quality of life, bread and butter issues, he actually sounded like a moderate Republican, except when he talked about the death penalty for dealers of fentanyl. But even something like that, which is undeniably radical, and personally, I only favor the death penalty for people who commit premeditated murder. But even something radical like that, considering how bad the fentanyl crisis has become, does not sound as off the wall as it would have even 3 years ago. So with such even an extreme perspective as Trump's on this, it's something that corresponds to public sentiment. So I really think that the GOP needs to go in a direction of getting things done for people or helping these people get things done for themselves. That's probably the better way of putting it. And I think another Trump candidacy is a good way of doing that. I don't think that Trump inherently is a right-wing Republican. I've never believed that. I think
No.
he always used to call himself a Rockefeller Republican, which is what I call myself. And I think that's always where his fundamental sensibilities are. And I think that if he is allowed to engage these sensibilities rather than respond to like the Ted Cruz wing of the party or something like that, then he should be able to do well as long as he does not fly off the handle, which is always a big question with Trump. Will he say something that's a totally unforced error and just distract from the issue at hand that he was doing very well on? That's a massive weakness with Trump, that this question even has to be raised. But we'll have to wait and see. But I'm not optimistic about the GOP's presidential prospects in 2024 because of changing demographics and mail balloting. But the GOP still can get to 270 while probably losing the national popular vote. So it's not like the GOP is totally it's lights out for them. Although I would say it's getting closer and closer in presidential races. So yeah, that's basically about all. That's really it. I really enjoyed this conversation, Carl. Thank you for having me on. And I am going to have a new show. It'll be broadcast to Twitter. I just have to make sure I know how to do that. So I look forward to having you on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't wait. And Joseph, thank you so much for your thoughts. You're always an amazing guest. I guess everyone give Joseph a round of applause. Please mount the like button for him if you've appreciated him today. And like I told you before, you are always welcome back. I'm sure we will chat many more times. And I'm looking forward to being on your show when it launches. And StreamYard broadcast to Twitter, I think. I don't know how you're gonna do it, but the technology is easy enough to figure out. So I'm sure that's gonna be awesome. Well, thank you again for joining me today. And guys, everyone, the links to follow Joseph with his YouTube channel and his Twitter are in the description below. I'm going to pull you off the stream and do one more final shill, and then I'll be right back with you in a second. All right, guys, that's all we have today for the stream. I do hope you like it, but I just want to remind everyone that this is going to be a twofer stream kind of day because I'm feeling a little saucy. Well, not really. I just figure if I'm going to watch content on YouTube, which I so rarely do, I might as well knit and spend some time with friends. And so I'm going to go take a little break. I'm going to go have some dinner. I'm going to go spend some time with the husband. And then around 10 o'clock tonight for a nice late night stream, I'm going to go live and I'm going to do some knitting and I'm going to try to figure out why people like Chrissy Mayer, because I don't understand. And I've been told that Chrissy Mayer is who I need to look up to and idolize and be best friends with if I want to be an influential YouTuber and influencer. And so I thought I would watch some of her content and people can explain to me why I should like Chrissy Mayer. It's a little bit of an experiment. I'm going to call this new series Nitwits, which is a little bit tongue in cheek, of course. But I look forward to seeing some of you later around 10 p.m. Eastern time tonight, and we'll just see how it goes, guys. Maybe this will be the first Nitwits. Maybe this will be the last Nitwits. Maybe we'll discover a whole new brand of content. Who really knows? But guys, please mount that like button on your way out the door. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And I will also, in addition to this stream later tonight, I will be back live streaming tomorrow at 5 p.m. solo, and I have some thoughts on some other things that I would like to share with you guys. Make sure you follow along, and I will let you know what I'm talking about tomorrow. All right, guys, take care, and we'll see you soon.